Good afternoon, everyone. Today is for November, the year 2004. I'm Dr. Dave Thompson, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our country's military conflicts, especially World War II. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participate in those conflicts. Today, I'm here at the museum and have the honor and the privilege of interviewing Warrant Officer Ben Stevens. Mr. Stevens was a supply officer with the 1252nd Combat Engineers in Europe during World War II. So we're going to talk to him about that and some other things. Nice to have you here, Ben.
Very good.
Can you spell your full name for us, please, Ben?
B-E-N, and then S-T-E-V-E-N-S.
Okay, and when and where were you born?
Well, I was born June 4th, 1919, in Toronto, Ontario.
Oh, Canadian, huh?
Cut up.
And when you entered the service, were you in America? Had you come to the States then?
Oh, yes, yeah. My father, we came to the States 4 years later, in 1923, and in 1930 my father became a citizen, so they called it through him. I became a citizen. But when I got out of service, I wanted to get my own citizenship papers, so I went for the test and so forth, and I had my own citizenship papers.
And where in the States did you come to from Canada?
We came through Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
And we stayed in Cleveland, Ohio. Well, from Toronto to Cleveland, right?
And what kind of work did your dad do?
My dad was, he had a store that sold hats and caps and so forth, haberdashery. And actually he was like a cap banker. In those years, everybody wore caps.
Right. And what prompted him to move to the States from Canada?
Well, he had some relatives in this area, so that's why he moved.
And your ancestors, how did they get to Canada originally?
Well, they went through, I guess from Europe. They went through Halifax. That's why we ended up in Canada.
Oh. And where in Europe did they come from?
I think my grandparents, that they came from Russia.
Oh, okay.
And so there's where it started.
And what was your mother's name, her maiden name? And
my mother's name was Rachel Surdin, S-U-R-D-I-N.
And your father's name?
His name was Michael, but it was not Stevens.
Oh.
It was anglicized. How do you say that?
Anglicized.
When my grandfather would send like $5 back to Europe because he had my father was with him, and there were 3 daughters back there. So when he would send the $5 or $10 a month back there, they would ask him, "What is your name?" And when he told them his name, they said, "Can we say Stevens?" He said, "Well, let it be Stevens."
So how did he spell his name then?
I don't know. It was funny, like Stavnitsu or something like that.
Were they from Russia?
Yeah, they were from Russia.
Oh,
yeah.
they were.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have one brother, and I had 3 sisters. One who is deceased.
Okay. And I assume you grew up during the Depression. What was that like for your family?
Well, because my father had this little hat and cap store, it wasn't that bad. He had some kind of an income, so it didn't affect us that much.
Do you remember where you went to grammar school, to grade school?
Yes, in Cleveland, Ohio, was a school called Andrew Jackson Rickoff.
Okay. And do you remember the street you lived on?
Oh boy, let's see. No.
Was it right in the city, or?
It was right in the city. Yes, it was in the city.
And where did you go to high school?
I went to high school called Alexander Hamilton High School in Cleveland.
Did you play any sports in school?
No, I didn't play sports in school, but I became addicted to playing handball when I turned about 17. And I played 4-wall handball for 40 years.
You did. And when you were growing up, what did your kids do for recreation and stuff like that?
Well,
besides him?
I have 2 sons and a daughter. The boys like to,
No, I mean when you were growing up.
Oh, when I was growing up.
Yeah.
What did I do? Let's see. Oh boy. Actually, I don't remember too much. The usual things.
Whatever kids
Just playing what kids do. We used to play on the street. We played a game called 3 Feet Off the Mud Gutter, where you had to run across the street. You see.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
And is it, I mean,
There wasn't much more to do.
When you were growing up, you just made your own fun
Right.
up. Didn't
Yeah.
have all these games.
Yeah,
and
I
stuff
remember
like
we
kids
used to have a game where people would go up against a pole, a light pole over there, and there'd be 3 guys in front. They'd stick their head between the legs over here. The idea was the opposition to jump on them to see if they could knock them down. You see,
Yeah.
we made up our own games. It wasn't like today.
Exactly. Yeah. And what year did you graduate from high school?
In 1937, June 1937.
And so, what did you do after you got out of high school?
Well, I worked as an usher in a theater.
Oh. And do you remember what you were doing on December 7th, 1941?
Well, actually, it was very shocking. I knew that I was going to be drafted soon, which I was in March of 1942.
Okay. And where did you go for your training
Well,
and stuff?
see, I lucked out. I made 3 cadres. A cadre is where they take certain people from certain organizations to help train the new organization. And I made 3 of them. And finally ending up with the 1252nd Engineer Combat Battalion. I was a staff sergeant then, and then I took the test and I made Warrant Officer Junior Grade.
And combat engineers, tell me a little bit about what
Well,
they
the combat engineers, they are primarily, they would make things to go across the rivers and so forth.
Right.
They would, actually, we were infantrymen also, which we proved.
Because you were pretty much under
Yes,
fire
right.
while you were doing all this
And,
stuff.
well, what an engineer would do, make what do you call them, that go across rivers?
Yeah, I forgot what they called.
But anyway, this is what we mostly did. And we went through, actually, I got overseas in September, I believe, September of 44. And then we went at the end of December, we went overseas to France, you see.
Right, yeah. The bridges are floating kind of.
Yes,
aren't
that's
they?
right. That's
yeah,
right. They're floating.
The Bailey bridges.
That's it, Bailey Bridge. I couldn't think of
okay.
it.
Yeah.
That's what it's.
And so, when did you first get into combat? Where was that?
Well, we were in number one. We were in the Battle of the Bulge, for one thing, and then there were 2 other battles that we were awarded medals for. I forget what actually right now I forget.
Where in the Battle of the Bulge were you? What
Well,
area?
we were it was Bastogne, underneath Bastogne.
Near there. Yeah.
But that I remember because
This was
right
very
in
cold then too,
Yeah,
in the winter time of
yeah.
'44. And so, did you cross the Rhine?
we crossed the Rhine. I forget just where, but that was a test because everybody was told, even myself, get your rifle ready over there and be prepared. But I lucked out and we got through, across the Rhine when we were supposed to, and we went forward.
Okay. Did you take many casualties while you
Yes,
guys
we
were over
did.
there?
We did. My captain, Captain Conham, started a history. But I was in headquarters company, and then later on, the rest of the companies, this was after the war, had made their own history, and I've got copies of the complete history of the 1256th Engineer Combat Battalion from its inception to the end of the war when we were discharged, and also it has a sad last 2 pages of killed in action and injuries, you see. So this is complete. I have the history.
That's great.
and I'm glad.
And as a supply officer, what basically was your job?
My job was to go from place to place to get the supplies, you see. And we had, I remember one time where I told my driver, I think you're going the wrong way. And had he gone straight, we would have gone into the German, you see. But he lucked out and took a right over here. We got back to our camp. Well, that was my job, just to make sure that we got the supplies to the other 3 companies.
Were you usually able to keep you guys pretty well supplied, or did you have a hard time sometimes?
No, we were getting the supplies.
And then, where were you when the war ended in Europe then?
We were getting ready to go over to Japan, and then when was it August that they threw the atom bomb, and so they had sent all our stuff to Japan, or to that area, you see, and we lucked out, and then
you still have warm feelings for Harry Truman, don't you?
Right. Oh yes, that's right.
But when did you come back to the States? Were you in the States at that time when you were getting ready? Oh, you were still over in Europe? We
were still over in Europe.
I see.
We came back by ship, naturally. Yeah. And we ended up in, I think, Boston. And then from there, we went down south where we were discharged.
Were you married at the time you were in the service?
Yes, I got married a couple months after I got in the service. I got in the service in March, and I think about July, I came back for my first trip back to Cleveland, and got married.
And where did you meet your wife?
In Cleveland.
And what was her name?
Her name was Ann Piper, P-E-I-P-E-R.
Is she still alive?
She is, and she's here today with us.
And you have how many children?
I have we have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl.
And what are their names?
Ralph is the oldest boy, and then there's Mark, and then I have a daughter, Natalie.
And what do they do?
Well, my Ralph, he graduated college, and he started to teach, but at that time they put him in the inner city, and all it was discipline. That discouraged him, so he says, I wasted 4 years, but he went into other things.
Any grandchildren do you have?
Oh, yes. For a while, I want to tell you about my son, Mark.
Yes.
Mark is very, very smart boy. He got his Ph.D. in history, and this guy knows what happened at the beginning of time to yesterday. You see, he is so smart. Yeah, anytime I want to know something, I call Mark. And my daughter, a very pretty girl, she started college at Ohio State, but she didn't. She came back and got married to her husband, now husband.
And any grandchildren?
Oh, yes, I have 6 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
I always tell my wife we started a dynasty.
And do you still live in Cleveland?
No, we don't. We live here in Palm Desert, California, about 13 miles from Palm Springs.
Absolutely. Oh,
you know where that's at.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we've been living there for about 26, 27 years.
Yeah.
So we came to California in 1966. That was a little bit longer.
Okay. And what kind of work did you do?
Well, I did accounting or bookkeeping for many, many years, and I did sales. And those 2 jobs got me through. Okay. My wife was a school teacher.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Okay, well, I think we'll probably need to wrap it up, so we'll get some of these other fellows out here. Anything else you can think of you'd like to?
No, except that we've been meeting with our group. This is the 54th year in Cleveland. When I lived there, I took about the 3rd and the 6th reunion, and we've become family. But naturally, over the years, a lot of us have passed away.